Okay, so with today's lecture, I would like to touch on a few important points. So I'm going to cruise through a few slides and stop where I need to. So this is going to be really important for you to understand when it comes to writing your lab report, the difference between biotic and abiotic. Biotic is the living environment. This is any and all organisms, be them plants, algae, minnows, frogs, whatever, anything that's alive. The abiotic is the physical environment, that's living space. Is it a pond? Is it a stream? Is it a hardwood forest? How large is it? What is its scale? These are any chemicals that are in that environment, be them natural or pollutants, gas exchange, things like that, what the soil is made out of, what type of rocks the soil comes from, all these different things. Any attribute of the ecosystem that is not alive is abiotic. So here we're going to talk about the hierarchy of biological organization. It starts with a species and ends with a landscape, or essentially a biosphere. So a species is a group of organisms that can interbreed and produce viable offspring. When you have more than one of these together, interacting and living together, that's a population of a species. When you have a number of different populations living together, that's a community. And when that community interacts with its physical, so when the biotic community interacts with the abiotic physical environment, that is an ecosystem. Now there's a number of different types of ecosystems, and where they collide essentially is called an ecotone. Where you have many interacting ecosystems, you get a landscape. Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple examples of this. So first off, you can say for a species, let's say a mole, little ground mole, that is an individual species. A group of them living together and interacting amongst each other, that is a population. Now you might have a population of moles, a population of rabbits, a population of clovers and blades of grass and different scrub oak trees. Maybe you have some deer and some fox. Now all of these populations interacting together make up a community, and the community interacting with its physical environment, you might be able to guess what ecosystem I'm describing. It would be a hardwood forest. So within that hardwood forest, you have the ecosystem of a hardwood forest. You have a community of organisms made up of various populations of different species. When you take that ecosystem, maybe there's a stream that runs through the hardwood forest, and that stream is its own ecosystem. It has different populations and interactions happening there. Maybe the hardwood forest is adjacent to a meadow or a grassy field. That comprises a different ecosystem with its own set of communities, populations, and species. So here we have a grassy meadow, a hardwood forest, and a stream ecosystem. Those interacting and combined together create a landscape. So here's another example, okay, and the pictures tend to help. So we have a population of krill or shrimp-like critters, okay? A bunch of them interacting together is a population. A number of different populations. We have the green dots are plankton, okay? Then you have your barracuda. Then you have your kelp grasses. Here we have some eels, all right? So we have a population of krill, we have a population of plankton, krill, eel, kelp beds, and a barracuda. All of these interacting together forms a community. Now you add the exchange of gases amongst them, okay, and the food chain that interacts here in this ecosystem, like the shrimp eating the plankton and the barracuda eating the shrimp, okay? Now you have your total ecosystem where you have interaction among the communities. There are a number of different types of landscapes, okay, where you have various ecosystems interacting. You have the atmosphere, which is all of the air. You have the hydrosphere, which is all of the water. And then you have the lithosphere, which is all of the rock. Within these various landscapes, you have a number of different ecosystems. When you combine all of these landscapes together, you get the biosphere. So here we have the interaction of the atmosphere landscape, the hydrosphere landscape, and the lithosphere, and the lithosphere landscape, all interacting to create the biosphere. And the biosphere essentially is the whole Earth. So understand the difference between potential and kinetic energy. Potential is when we pull the arrow back and hold it. This bow is set up. There is energy contained within this bow that is going to be transferred mechanically into the arrow in the form of kinetic energy once it's released. Understand that photosynthesis and cellular respiration are opposite reactions. This is going to matter when we start talking about gross and primary productivity. Okay, so trophic levels. The trophic level is position in the food chain of an organism. There are 3 trophic levels, essentially, 4 when you include decomposers. Okay, the first trophic levels, that is producers. These are organisms that make their energy from the sun. They are known as autotrophs. They make their own food. The second level are primary consumers. Now, primary consumers only eat vegetation. They only eat grass, so they're only eating producers. They are essentially herbivores. However, they don't make their own food. They have to eat it, so they are known as autotrophs. Secondary consumers eat primary consumers, so these are essentially your carnivores. They are also heterotrophs. And then your decomposers are those organisms that eat dead tissues. So they are known as saprotrophs. An example of a producer or an autotroph is grass. An example of a primary consumer or a heterotroph is the caterpillar. An example of a secondary consumer or also a heterotroph, which eats only other organisms, is the bird, eating the caterpillar that eats the grass. And then eventually all these things die, and it is your decomposers that eat that dead material, and those are things like bacteria and fungus. So here we're going to talk about gross primary productivity and net primary productivity. This is, you can kind of think of this like your paycheck. So you get your paycheck and you have your gross income, but then you take away all of your deductions and taxes and you're left with your net income. Well, gross primary productivity is the total amount of photosynthesis that's happening in an ecosystem. Net primary productivity is gross minus cellular respiration. So cellular respiration is kind of like all of those deductions and taxes that you have in your paycheck. So gross primary productivity, all of the photosynthesis that's happening minus the cellular respiration, and you get total net primary productivity. This picture represents where we have the most and the least primary productivity. Where the earth is greener, that is where you have significantly more primary productivity happening. So here's the equation again. Net primary productivity is gross minus cellular respiration, or essentially photosynthesis minus cellular respiration. And then here shows some of the net primary productivity for different ecosystems. Coral reefs and algal beds have some of the greatest net primary productivity, even greater than a tropical rainforest, which is often assumed to be number one. However, it's not. And then swamps and marshes are a close third. So anywhere that you have a lot of green, lush vegetation is where you're going to have the most net primary productivity. And of course, in the bottom you can see that deserts have significantly less than any other ecosystem. Now, this is an interesting little fact here, which is beginning to be attributed to some changes that the Earth has seen, is that humans account for only 0.5% of the amount of land-based biomass. Okay, so what that is how much essentially our total weight of creatures on the surface of the planet, of organisms on the surface of the planet, but we use 32% of the net primary productivity. So that's a curious comparison there.